Money 105.5 with Glenn Spillman and Charlton Curry. This is Epic Sports Radio.
Well, welcome everyone to our new show, the Epic Sports Radio, and my name is Charlton Curry. I'm here with my partner, Glenn Spillman, and we also have Big C calling in from the East Coast. But I want to thank everyone, number one, for listening to the program. Here in California, everybody loves sports. Nationwide, it loves sports. It's something I've been a part of since I was a little boy, Glenn, and I know this is near and dear to your heart as well.
Oh, I love it. I love it that we have this show and that we could talk about sports. And again, me as well, I want to thank everybody for listening. I'm excited. I know you're going to be excited. We're going to bring you sports news that's going to blow your mind. We're going to get you the behind-the-scenes stuff. We're going to get you the stories that you want to hear. And anyone out there, subject matter you want to talk about, just email me at glenn@epicnewsports.com, and we'll get you going. And follow us on Twitter at Epic News Sports and on Facebook, Epic News Sports.
And also for everyone who wants to know, well, who are these guys? Who is Charlton Curry? Who is Glenn Spillman? Well, first of all, for myself, I've been on air since about 1988, making television commercials, covering sports when I was in college at Sacramento State. And also I got my opportunity in the sports business, Glenn, with Cal High Sports. They've been around about 35 years covering players in the high school level, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, soccer. It all starts somewhere. And we know that sports is a big vehicle. It brings everyone together. We talked about how the NFL, over half the United States population, watches NFL football. Well, I got my start working around high school football, and then my first chance covering NFL sports was with John Madden's broadcast producer. His name is Mike Roig. I did a game in Los Angeles, and he said, can you be at Candlestick Park on Thursday? It was for the 49ers and the Chargers.
Yeah.
Well, it was with the great, the late gentleman that we all know him with John Madden and Pat Summerall. But I learned so much by watching those guys. And then Fran Morrison, the broadcast producer. I've been around a lot of talent, from Steve Young to Jerry Rice to Joe Montana, and just seeing how they handled their business. So people look at sports as, let's cheer for a team.
Right.
But it's a business.
It is.
And it's a cutthroat business.
It definitely is.
And that's something that we want to touch on more. So you can tell the audience about you and your background.
Well, I've been doing this since about 1990. I got into it. I've played sports throughout high school, and I got into the college level. And I was fortunate enough to go to the University of Oklahoma, to where I wanted to go as a kid. I remember meeting Wayman Tisdale outside of a basketball game in Barry, Switzer one time, and they were so nice to me. It was so great. I said, I'm going to that school. And then with the football in the South and everything, it's like a religion. And I got into it. I was doing health and sports science for a while. I was going to be a medical trainer for the team when I grew up. And I kind of took a side road. I worked with the Oklahoma City Blazers for a while as a medical trainer. We won the Levens Cup back in the early 90s. And and I started out doing sports photography, and I got to work with the Houston Rockets. I got to know Steve Francis real well, and got to know him. And then I was working with the Round Rock Express. I just kind of spread off, and I covered 2 Super Bowls myself, and I got to know the behind-the-scenes kind of thing, what goes on when they're not on the field. I got to go in the locker rooms and talk to these guys on a personal level, off the record, and it is just, it's a great thing, and it is a business, and unfortunately, I've seen players moved that I didn't think need to be moved, but you know what? It's a business, and that all there is to it.
Well, I'll never forget, I've covered a couple of Super Bowls. NBC Sports had flown me down to the Super Bowl in San Diego, and that was the one where John Elway, at the end of his career, made the dive into the end zone, and he beat Brett Favre and the Packers. And then also in Miami when Atlanta played Denver. So those were some tremendous experiences, but I'll never forget something that fans will never see. I recall one time being in the Raiders locker room, and the late Al Davis.
Oh, yes, Al Davis.
When John Gruden was the coach.
Yeah.
They had just
Chucky.
They had beaten the Kansas City Chiefs. Mm-hmm. But I didn't hear what Al was saying to John Gruden, but I saw him pointing his finger like, how dare you call a pass play when I wanted a run play? I mean, I couldn't hear what he said.
Right.
But how often do you get scolded after a victory?
Exactly.
But
Al was famous for that.
He was famous for that. And then, so I've been a part of that most of my life, from Major League Baseball and college sports, covering the Pac-10 at that time, and then also with being on the air in the San Francisco Bay Area. But I love the fact that we get to talk about the sports business, and it really is a business. And we're going to bring on Big C in a little bit, and he can talk about some of the things that he's done from the business side of sports, because everyone loves to watch their favorite team, whether it's the Giants or whether it's the Falcons or the Cowboys or the Raiders and 49ers. But there's a business side of this. And I really hope that every young kid that thinks they're going to be the next professional football player, they really focus on getting the education, have the degree.
Yeah, that's key.
Because it's a short-lived business. And Big C can talk about the many things that he's seen on the business side of life. So everyone that wants to be the coach, or we want to be the Monday morning quarterback, and whether someone should have passed the ball or run the ball, we all talk about what happened in the Super Bowl last year.
Right.
Should Beast Mode have gotten the ball? Yeah. We don't know.
Yeah.
But we do know this. Everyone can have an opinion,
yes,
just like ours, yours just as valid as ours. So speaking of that, I want to bring on Big C. Again, we mentioned Big C. Thank you for being a part of our show. And you are all-pro, over 40 years experience in covering sports and playing sports as a coach, as a player, and a broadcaster. And you know the business side of it, which I hope that fans can take away from this, because the business side is what makes this work. And that's why we think it's such an advantage when an advertiser puts their money behind a sports program.
Yeah.
Because half of the stadiums, in fact, more than half of them, are filled every weekend. So with that said, Big C, can you come on and talk about your thoughts on the new show and also your experience covering pro football as an athlete and as a player?
Guys, it's great to be here with the new show. I mean, it's a wonderful experience, having spent many years in broadcasting and radio and on television, and many more years as a player. And when you talk about the business aspect of this, it is truly a business. I think the average fan really doesn't understand the expeditious growth of the NFL economically. If you go back to the last strike that the NFL had in the late 80s, the average salary of an NFL player was $123,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's
chump change now, man.
A practice roster player, if you're on the practice squad, the minimum you can make now is $353,000 a year, not to even play, just to go out and practice throughout the season. And so that's where you really bring in the business aspect of this game now. And if you go and look this weekend, there's a game when you want to really talk about business. Two of the three highest paid defensive players in the league this year will be playing this weekend.
Yes.
And when you look at J.J. Watt and Ken Houston, the linebacker for Kansas City,
yes,
both of these players are making in excess of $100 million over their 5-year contracts.
Wow.
But yet their teams are only 1-3. You have to understand from a business perspective, where do you make your investment? You have to make your investment in a quarterback. And if you look at Houston, they had an opportunity last year to draft Blake Bortles or Teddy Bridgewater.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yet they drafted Jadeveon Clowney, who really is a bust. He's the next big bust in the NFL. He'll never do anything on that Houston defense because you have J.J. Watt.
Yes.
So everything is going to be forced to you. But when you look at it from a business perspective, and I'm glad that you touched on education, I think so many young players nowadays get misconstrued, think they have a little talent that you can play professional sports.
Yes.
Right.
Glenn, you went to Oklahoma and you spoke about meeting Barry Switzer and Wayman Tisdale.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to process as a player, and you being in the locker rooms as a physical therapist and stuff, you have to be able to process the game plan that's put forth. When you're on a football field, when they call an audible, that's less time during the audible than what you have in the huddle to process a play.
Right.
So unless you can translate that to your body from your mind, you can't play this game.
Right.
And I saw many great athletes as a player, and we used to look at it back when I was playing. We'd always say they had a body by Fisher but a mind by Mattel.
Yes.
Because they look great walking on the field. But, as far as making things happen after that, they just could not process what was taught in the meeting rooms on the practice field, and then when you get in the live game situation and everything is happening so quickly, you just couldn't get it done.
Now, do you think Clowney is going to end up like Ryan Leaf, just kind of a feather in the wind, distant memory?
Well, I'll take you back even a little bit further than Ryan Leaf. There was a player that was drafted out of Auburn around 91. His name was Andre Bruce.
Yes.
He was supposed to be the next great defensive player. He was drafted by the Falcons, number 1 overall. He ended up his career with the Raiders trying to make it as a tight end.
Yes.
But he was a bust playing on the outside, same as Clowney, that stand-up defensive end position. They were projecting him to be the next Lawrence Taylor.
Oh.
Which he could never get that much dirt on his cleat as Lawrence Taylor had.
Right.
Well, you know what? Also, Big C, there's something about everyone wants to be the coach. And everyone, whether you're the great John Madden or if you're Belichick, or even if you go back to the great Tom Landry, and Jimmy Johnson, when he came from the University of Miami and he got the chance with the Dallas Cowboys, I know they started off really bad. They were not a winning team, Glenn.
No.
But what Jimmy Johnson talked about is what Big C just touched on. There are guys that are 6'5", 6'6", 300 pounds, and maybe they can bench press 500 pounds, and that looks great on paper.
It does.
But Jimmy Johnson, he's always talked about, Big C, give me guys who can play. Even a guy like a Warren Sapp, I thought that he was a monster of a guy, of a physical presence, until I interviewed him a couple of times when he played for Tampa and they played Oakland over in the Coliseum. Well, Warren Sapp's about 6 feet tall and about 300 pounds, but he had a motor that could help him achieve. There's a lot of guys that have that thing where, you look at a guy like an Emmitt Smith, who's one of the best running backs in the history of the NFL, didn't have the big size like a big Jim Brown, but he was also effective because of his offensive line. So as we wrap up the next 2 minutes, Big C, go ahead and touch on some of the players that maybe didn't have the appearance, they didn't have the look, whether it's a Fran Tarkenton or whomever, and then how they made it in the league anyway.
Well, the first thing I'll touch on when you talk about everybody wants to be a coach, I think you might want to go ask Joe Philbin about that.
Oh, wow.
The Dolphins didn't figure that he was cutting the mold as a coach. And when you talk about players being undersized, I want to go to one player, and this is the late, great Sam Mills, last of the Carolina Panthers as a player and a coach. He died of Hodgkin disease about a decade ago.
Right.
Sam Mills was 5'9" on a good day as a middle linebacker in the NFL, and he was one of the top 3. When you look at the top 3 linebacking cores all time in the NFL, the New Orleans Saints, Chicago Bears, and the New York Giants possessed them. Sam Mills at 5'9",
yes,
made All-Pro on 5 different occasions in the NFL. Tom Jackson is another one of those linebackers. You see him on ESPN. He was a 5'9" linebacker. You go back even further to the undefeated team of the Miami Dolphins in 1972.
Yes.
Manny Fernandez was a 5'11" defensive tackle who played on that team. There's been many, many players that have been undersized. And I'll tell you right now, the greatest performing one in the NFL would be Steve Smith,
yes,
the wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens.
Yes.
Steve Smith is 5'9", and when you look at all these teams, such as a Calvin Johnson, a 6'5" monstrous receiver.
Yes.
But Steve Smith, if it came down to heart and talent and willingness to play, that you can't judge a player by his size, I'm going to take him and put him on my side in a heartbeat.
Well, Big C, I do agree with that. There's always about the heart that you have. And as we close out this segment on NFL football, I always want to say I appreciate you and the knowledge that you bring, not from a fan point of view, but a guy who's been in the trenches and a guy who's seen what it's like to be in the studio and to put that message out for the world to listen to. So again, this is Charlton Curry and Glenn Spillman with Epic Sports Radio. We want to thank you for listening every Wednesday at 4:00 p.m. on Money 105.5. We're going to come back to you and we have more sports to talk about, and we hope that you will enjoy it as we come back to Money 105.5.
My name is Lynn Hallbash. I'm a certified agent with Safe ID Trust. Here is an interesting fact. Most people insure their cars, homes, and valuables for their peace of mind and replacements. But in light of ID theft being the fastest growing crime in the world, they don't think about insuring their identities. But that's what we do at Safe ID Trust. We offer online ID monitoring with our Safe ID Trust detective, wallet replacement service, 24/7 customer service, and much, much more. By having identity coverage, we restore your identity 100% to pre-theft status. We do all the work for you. You can contact me at 916-826-5762 and the web at safezone.safeidtrust.com.
If you're a homeowner and you're struggling with your mortgage payments, if your bank is giving you the runaround and you can't get a loan modification and attorneys are simply too expensive, contact NFA.
First, let's note that NFA has received a certification of registration from the California Attorney General's office and has a bond on file with the Secretary of State as required by law. NFA will inform homeowners of what their projected income and expenses and other info needs to be to have the best chance of receiving a loan mod. We will recommend qualifying income and expenses that will get them pre-qualified.
If your loan company is giving you the runaround and attorneys are simply too expensive, contact NFA at 916-896-5757. That is 916-896-5757.
Money 105.5 with Epic Sports Radio.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Charlton Curry along with Glenn Spillman on Epic Sports Radio. Again, we want to thank you for listening in, and we love talking about sports. And on the last segment, we had Big C, the all-pro former football player who's covered basketball and football and baseball, radio and TV. But Glenn, I want to just touch on this because everyone knows that football is the king.
It is.
There's no substitute for it. So as an advertiser, if I'm writing a check, I have to ask myself, who's following the company that I'm writing a check for? If you're following a sports program, it's a no-brainer because half the population watches sports in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So if I'm a car dealership and I want to sell more cars, do I advertise on a program where there's less people or more?
Exactly.
And we know that there's auto malls that we're talking to, and they want people to buy their cars. And we're talking to people who love sports. You got to drive a car to get to the game.
Yep.
You got to get in the game and listen to what's happening on the radio. Those of you listening right now, you want to buy a car, well, you're probably going to buy from the dealership that supports and supports what you have an interest in, whether it's our kids or whether it's any other business. So we're asking you to pay attention to that. We have a great station here, Money 105.5 here in Sacramento, owned by Salem Media Group. And Glenn, with that, we're going to touch a little bit more about the NFL because we know that's the king. We know that people here in the Northern California, they follow the 49ers. They follow the Raiders. We talked about John Madden and the late Al Davis and how much he meant to NFL football. And because of what they did in the early days that Big C talked about, now we have this 50th year anniversary coming up, and the Super Bowl is going to be here in Northern California at the new 49er Stadium, Levi Stadium. Well, if you're an advertiser and you're not a part of that, you're missing out on the biggest sporting event in the history of the United States.
Big time.
Big time. So, Glenn, as we get back into NFL, what's happening this week, I know you're big with the lines, and there are a lot of people that like to bet on sports.
Yeah.
I know it's something that a lot of people say, well, I don't do that.
Right, right.
But when you have money on the line and your team may or may not win, I think about what happened with the game just over the weekend that we all talked about with Seattle and also Detroit. Well, they were up 13-3.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people making a lot of money on 13-3.
Oh, yeah.
But when Detroit brought it into a 13-10, right?
Yeah.
There was a little bit of a difference in money changing. So talk about that and what your thoughts are on that.
Well, think about, I look, and I'll be honest, I do bet a little bit, but I'm not crazy. I'm a little guy. I'll do a $20 bet on a parlay. I just do that just to make it a little interesting, just to make it a little fun to watch the game. But when you go into something and you have, something, you bet $100 to win $450.
Yes.
And you're going into Seattle, the 12th man. They're one of the loudest stadiums besides Kansas City in the nation. Pretty much everybody's going to pick Seattle.
Yes.
And they're going to think they're going to cover the spread. But one of the things I think, when Beast Mode wasn't getting in the game, when he was out, that changes the rules a little bit.
Yeah.
You got to do your homework when you bet and when you look at lines. And there a lot of times the smart bet is going to be on the underdog. I'd rather take the points and have the other team win, but cover my points. But there's been way too many times where at the last second someone may kick a field goal, touchdown, fumble, something will happen, and it'll just knock you out. And a lot of people lost a lot of money.
Well, I wonder how many of those people are actually in our audience.
A lot of them.
Because we know, as you mentioned, Glenn, when you have some skin in the game,
yes,
it makes a big difference. And perhaps that's why so many people watch the sport. And that's why if you're an advertiser, people aren't betting on if your bank's going to close your home loan. People aren't betting on if your insurance company is going to write you a policy.
Right.
And people probably aren't even betting on if you're going to sell whatever merchandise to the consumer. But people pay attention to sports because their money's on the line.
Exactly. And you know what? When it comes to sports, and I go up to the sports book, and sometimes I'll just go up there to watch a game. And they've got TVs everywhere, and I'll watch people, I'll listen to people, I'll talk to people, and I'll just interact with them. And sports is a multi-billion dollar a year industry in every aspect, whether you're going to the game, watching it at home, going to a sports pub and watching it. People follow sports, and they're called fans for a reason. Fans is short for fanatic.
Yes.
And I have seen fanatics. And they're great people. And when you're advertising with sports, they appreciate that. They will pay attention to you. It's like I'm looking online right now, and I won't mention the site, but right to the side, there is a major car company on both sides of the screen. And I'm looking at that. So, people will look at that and go, man, let me check that out. If you're a sports pub that advertises with a sports company like Epic Sports, people are going to go, hey, I'm going to go check that sports pub out because we hang out there.
Yes.
And, and it's huge business, huge.
Well, Glenn, also, when you talk about why people would cover sports and follow sports, talk a little bit more about Epic Sports. I know that you've covered Super Bowls, and we know that you cover all the major sports. I know that since working with you, we've covered the Rivercats, and we had a chance to interview Brett Bochy, who has a World Series ring with the San Francisco Giants.
Yeah.
We've also covered Republic FC, their soccer team here in Sacramento. And if they don't get a big state-of-the-art stadium, at least 25,000, man, their fans deserve it. So talk about Epic. What are people going to see when they go to Epic News Sports?
Well, Epic News Sports, like I say, we cover everything sports. And what I like to do, and I will cover all the news that's going out there, but I like the little spice of things. I like the little nuggets. I like to talk to people. Like if I'm interviewing someone, I'll of course talk about the game, but I want to know something about them. It's like when I talk to Hunter Pence.
Yes.
One of his favorite things is a skateboard.
Yep.
And he'll get on his little scooter and he'll ride around town. He'll go to the game, and that's what he likes to do. That's what kind of calms him down. That's his little mantra that he does. And Epic News Sports, we cover things on a very real level. And when we bring it to you, and it's just something that's going to be phenomenal. We're going to be covering the Stockton Heat this weekend.
Yes.
And I'm sure we're going to see a great game, and we're going to meet some great people and have some great interviews. And I want to do a little quick thank you to them. We were there a few weeks ago when they were showing people the arena, and the front office staff was very nice to us, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's always great when people open the door, because hockey is big. In fact, they start the first game of the year this week up in Toronto. So I know that there's so much going on in the sports world, and we're going to talk about college football coming up next, but I do want to finish out. There's a couple of teams I know in Northern California, people follow the 49ers, and they follow the Raiders.
Yep.
We know that San Francisco is an underdog, 7 points to the New York Giants. They're going to go to the Meadowlands. And I know there's so much talk about what's wrong with 49ers. Well, I think, number one, Jim Harbaugh left, but you can tell me your thoughts.
Well, I think that Colin Kaepernick does not trust his line. That's my thought. That's my theory. It's not set in stone. I think a lot of you guys out there will agree with me. He just does not trust his line. He gets out of the pocket as quick as he can. And, they're going in, though. I really think they're going in against the Giants in the Meadowlands, but I'm going to give you another prediction. I'm going to say that the 49ers win, but they're going to struggle, but they're going to win. And,
that's a bold prediction, Glenn.
It is a bold prediction, and I'm going to, you come back and you listen to this radio show next week and archive it, and my prediction will come true.
Well, I hope that's right, because it's good to have, at least if you have some excitement around what's happening in the local scene, that's always good. Now, across the bay, We're going to cover the Oakland Raiders. They have Denver coming into town.
Oh, Lord.
I know Peyton Manning's – there's so much talk that Peyton Manning is having a hard time even undressing after a game, and I know we want to touch on that. And give us about 20 seconds of your thought on Peyton Manning and what he means right now.
Hey, you know what? They thought he was washed up. When I say they, I mean people. And you know, he's not washed up. He may be in a little pain a little bit, but he's going to come in here. He's going to rock the house. I'm a Raider guy, dude. Go Raiders. But I'm telling you, I'm sorry, guys, but you're going to lose the game by 14 points.
Well, just win, baby. We can all think about that in the black hole. And so as we wrap up on the NFL, we'll come back and we'll talk some college football, and we'll have Big C back. He'll talk about the SEC Southeastern Conference. We'll cover more what's going on the national scene, and you can follow that and more on Epic Sports Radio every Wednesday at 4 o'clock p.m. on Money 105.5. At Gamble Insurance Agency, we put the odds in your favor. We handle most or all of your insurance needs and act as your insurance advisor. We will put together a suitable buying strategy with your financial future in mind. We are an independent farmers agency. Call Kit Gamble for a free farmers-friendly review of your insurance policy at 530-772-5041. That is 530-772-5041.
My name is Lynn Hallbash. I'm a certified agent with Safe ID Trust. Here is an interesting fact. Most people insure their cars, homes, and valuables for their peace of mind and replacements. But in light of ID theft being the fastest growing crime in the world, they don't think about insuring their identities. But that's what we do at Safe ID Trust. We offer online ID monitoring with our Safe ID Trust Detective, wallet replacement service, 24/7 customer service, and much, much more. By having identity coverage, we restore your identity 100% to pre-theft status. We do all the work for you. You can contact me at 916-826-5762 and the web at safezone.safeidtrust.com.
Half of the United States population follows sports in some form or fashion. Sports is a billion-dollar industry. If you're not advertising with a sports team, you are simply missing the boat. Boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. EpicNewsSports.com is your doorway to helping your customers follow sports. Whether it's pro, college, or prep sports, it is a great investment of your advertising dollar. With half of the country following sports, you can too by visiting EpicNewsSports.com.
This is Epic Sports Radio on Money 105.5 and Money105.5.com.
Welcome back to the show, Epic Sports Radio. My name is Charlton Curry. I'm here with my partner, Glenn Spillman. And wow, college football, it just kind of makes me feel good. It smells good. Maybe because when you go to college, everyone wants to go to the big game. And I know that we have a lot of football to talk about. And we have Big C on the line, and he's going to touch a little bit on football in the SEC. We hear about, Glenn, the power conferences.
Yeah.
And we hear about the Pac-12. It used to be the Pac-8, then the Pac-10, now the Pac-12.
Right.
The Big Ten, which has more than actually 10 schools.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to do the math there.
Yeah.
We have the Southeastern Conference, which is considered the premier conference in college football. But again, I want to go back to this when we had Paul Bear Bryant, and he was a great coach at Alabama. Mm-hmm. There was a time that they would not allow integration at their schools.
Right.
Now, most all the schools are integrated.
Right.
On the athletic level, the coaching level, not as much. Not much has changed.
Right.
But I do want to know that, Big C, you cover football in the Southeastern Conference, and it's so important to always say this. If you're an advertiser and you're writing a check right now, and you're going to pay for some sports program, whether it's radio or TV, you got to ask yourself this question. How many people follow your dollar? How many people are actually following your dollar? Are they following your insurance ad? Are they following your news ad when you want to cover the mortgage business or the stock market? Everybody talks about stocks. No one really knows. We're not Warren Buffett. But I want to make sure that if you're an advertiser and you're writing a check, if your product is not being followed by half of the United States population, you got to rethink what your money is going for. And with that being said, Big C, we know that there's free labor that happens every Saturday in college football. In the SEC, Glenn, most stadiums have at least 100,000 fans.
Yeah.
Where can you get 100,000 fans to show up for anything?
No, exactly.
So if you're an advertiser and you're writing a check, do you want to write a check for someone who has 100,000 fans showing up or someone that has maybe 3,000 fans showing up? So with that said, Big C, want to talk a little bit about SEC football. We know that CBS covers SEC football. Half of the country thinks that the SEC conference, Southeastern Conference, is the most dominant conference in football. Can you talk about why that is and then what you expect to see coming out of the SEC this year as we get closer to the playoffs?
Well, I'll touch on that little advertising thing just a little bit. That's why Chick-fil-A has become the largest fast food franchise here in the South, because they cover SEC football. And when you have 5 stadiums in your conference that hold in excess of 100,000 fans, you got a following just on that alone. But when you look at the SEC, there's 6 teams that are in the top 25 in the country. It's still amazing that Ohio State is still at number 1. I recall Florida State dropped from a national championship down to number 4, never recovered from that. With a couple close games early in the season.
Yes.
Ohio State hasn't blown out anybody yet. But when you look at the cream of the crop at SEC, you got to look at Texas A&M. This is a team that has learned how to win. They're only ranked at number 9. Alabama's ranked ahead of A&M with 1 loss. But you know, this team is just a power conference, and Alabama last week proved that they came back in a game that they were an underdog against Georgia and just handled Georgia in Georgia's own home stadium. Ole Miss has been one of those teams that really hasn't put a firm grasp on themselves yet. They don't have a running game. They have a quarterback that can move the ball down the field through the air. But if they're going to get any further in the season and stay up high in the rankings, they're going to have to learn how to run the ball. That's their Achilles heel right now. But this conference has been known as a power conference. You look at Nick Chubb, the running back at Georgia, but probably the most dominant running back in the country is Leonard Fournette at LSU.
Yes, he's amazing.
This is a man amongst boys. He's just a sophomore, but this is one of those players you question because he's not eligible for the draft. Should he sit out his junior year in the risk of injury? And I'll go back to Todd Gurley, the running back with the Rams, who was injured last year at Georgia, and people had asked the same question of him, tore an ACL.
Yes.
But Leonard Fournette right now is averaging over 200 yards a game rushing. LSU is lacking at the pivot position, though, right now, and that's their Achilles. And so when you look at this conference as a whole, this is the religion of the South. College football. There's college football, there's church, and then whatever else happens after that.
Barbecue.
Barbecue, too.
Yeah, you're going to find a lot of barbecue hogs down here. Pigs don't walk around very lightly. They're all nervous.
They're always nervous.
Some of them with 3 feet, right?
Well, Big C, we do want to thank you for giving us your spiel on the Southeastern Conference, and so we thank you for that. Following Epic Sports Radio, we'll have you on again next week, and again, every Wednesday, 4 o'clock p.m., you can hear Big C as he'll cover pro football and also football from the SEC. And now, Glenn, I know you're a big OU guy.
Oh, you got it, baby.
And OU has a big game coming up, I hear.
They do.
Are they playing Kansas?
Kansas? No, Dorothy, they're not playing Kansas. Down with the horns. Yeah, we got the, 109 meetings so far.
Yeah.
Since 1900. So I got my buddy on the line. Greg Witt, are you there?
Here, Glenn, how are you?
I'm doing good, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
All right. Well, guys, Greg Witt, he's been a OU season ticket holder for over 40 years. And Greg, how many games have you missed? And before you even became a season ticket holder, how many OU games have you missed?
Well, at home, I probably missed 5.
Okay. And how many meetings have you gone to the Red River Rivalry?
Well, the Red River Rivalry, this will be my 36th year in a row.
Right on, brother. And you know what? Last year, it was a good game, and Oklahoma took it barely, 31-26. Oklahoma and Texas are both a different team this year. And, what are your predictions? With TCU just beating the crap out of Texas last week, and then OU kind of struggled a little bit. Why don't we talk a little bit about OU and your thoughts on OU football right now?
Well, I think right now OU football is probably at its peak it's been in several years, simply because Bob Stoops made so many coaching changes in the off season. brought in Lincoln Riley from East Carolina, and he's known for his throw-out offense under Mike Leach. I think that's made a big difference in the way we play football at OU. Baker Mayfield, of course, won the starting quarterback position from Trevor Knight over last year. I think it's because Baker is probably able to see the field. He thinks faster. He moves faster. Not to say Trevor couldn't or isn't. He just absolutely is better on his feet, better throwing arm than Trevor was. I mean, Trevor's still a team captain, still a leader on this football team, and plays an important part every day in it. But with Lincoln's new offense and having so many receivers out there all the time where you're throwing or running, I just think it's made a big difference with Baker Mayfield on the field. And I think going down Saturday to the Cotton Bowl, even though Texas is having a down season, no matter how good or how bad either team is, when OU Texas kicks off in the Cotton Bowl, everybody is on equal ground, and everybody seems to play their best football that weekend. So we'll have to play heads up, and we'll have to be ready to take whatever happens. But we're going to have to be able to move the football both in the air and on the running game.
And I will say this, and I do joke a lot, and I say down with the horns every time I get a chance. But well, all kidding aside, you can't. No matter what Texas, just like you said, have gone through this year, you've got to go into this game thinking, hey, man, these guys are coming in with the chip on their shoulder, and we better keep our eyes open and keep things rocking and rolling. Because even though, I mean, Mayfield, he's 88 for 135, he's got 1,382 yards, and he only has 3 interceptions. Last game was a little shaky, and Hurd's coming in, with only 661 yards. But OU, they've got 42 points per game, almost double what Texas has, 24.6 a game. But, points allowed on OU is 22.2. And I know it's a new game. It's fresh. We got to wrap this up in a couple minutes, brother. Tell me what you're going to be doing this weekend at the OU Texas. And I know you've got a prediction for me. What do you predict? I want to score from you.
Well, I think without a doubt it's going to be a tough ball game just because it is OU Texas. And when you have a stadium that seats 92,000 fans and they're half in orange and half in red, the cosmopolitan look of college football and what you're trying to accomplish totally changes. All of a sudden it's a whole new rivalry, probably one of the greatest rivalries, not only in football, but in sports altogether.
Yes. Because
it's so noted for that. So I think that Oklahoma will go down there. I think they're going to play one of their best games of the year. And I think Oklahoma will probably win 42-14.
You know what? I'll agree with that. And I'm going to put a challenge out to any Longhorn fan out there listening. If you take this bet, I'll take it with you. If OU wins, you get a tattoo of OU on you. And if Texas wins, I'll get a tattoo of the Longhorn on me. So if anyone wants to take that challenge, you let me know at Glenn@epicnewsports.com. Greg,
well, I already got my OU tattoo, and I don't believe I'm going to get that Longhorn tattoo, but you won't have to worry about it because the Sooners will prevail.
There you go, brother. Boomer Sooner down with the horns. Thanks for talking to us, Greg.
Man,
you bet. Boomer Sooner to you, too.
All right, man.
Glenn, I wonder how popular this show is in Texas.
Yeah, we might get some hate mail on that, but that's okay. But I guarantee you there'll be a couple people take me up on that bet.
Well, I tell you, down in Texas, there are a lot of people that love their football. And in fact, when you think about Texas football, high school games, they attract like 20,000, even 40,000 fans to turn out to see a high school football game.
I've been to small towns in Texas, and their football stadiums is better than the courthouse, man.
That's amazing.
That thing is awesome looking.
From what I've heard, the stadiums are the courthouse in Texas, but that's just a joke, so don't hate me for that.
Yeah.
And you can follow more about football and college, the SEC with Big C. We have the Red River Rivalry coming up this weekend down in Texas with OU in Texas. You can follow that and more on Epic News Sports, and we'll have every Wednesday at 4 p.m. on Money 105.5. When we come back, we'll talk more sports on Money 105.5. If you're a homeowner and you're struggling with your mortgage payments, if your bank is giving you the runaround and you can't get a loan modification and attorneys are simply too expensive, contact NFA.
First, let's note that NFA has received a certification of registration from the California Attorney General's office and has a bond on file with the Secretary of State as required by law. NFA will inform homeowners of what their projected income and expenses and other info needs to be to have the best chance of receiving a loan mod. We will recommend qualifying income and expenses that will get them pre-qualified.
If your loan company is giving you the runaround and attorneys are simply too expensive, contact NFA at 916-896-5757. That is 916-896-5757. Half of the United States population follows sports in some form or fashion. Sports is a billion-dollar industry. If you're not advertising with a sports team, you are simply missing the boat. Boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. EpicNewsSports.com is your doorway to helping your customers follow sports. Whether it's pro, college, or prep sports, it is a great investment of your advertising dollar. With half of the country following sports, you can too by visiting EpicNewsSports.com. At Gamble Insurance Agency, we put the odds in your favor. We handle most or all of your insurance needs and act as your insurance advisor. We will put together a suitable buying strategy with your financial future in mind. We are an independent farmers agency. Call Kit Gamble for a free farmers-friendly review of your insurance policy at 530-772-5041. That is 530-772-5041.
The premier show for all your sports needs. Epic Sports Radio on Money 105.5.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Charlton Curry with my partner Glenn Spillman on Epic Sports Radio. And Glenn, we had Big C on. He talked about NFL football and then college football. And we know this heart of the season for college football. Everyone's jockeying for the playoffs. But we know what just happened with the big games over the last weekend, Glenn. We had some Ole Miss. They were in prime position to be in the top 3 in the country. They went down to Florida in the swamp and got knocked off.
Yeah, you know, all the top 10 teams that got off or knocked off last week, I noticed one statistic that stood out to me.
What was that?
They all didn't score in 2 different quarters, whether it was 2 consecutive or they just didn't score in 2 different quarters, and that really killed them. You know, and I think the biggest surprise was UCLA.
Yeah,
getting knocked off. That was the biggest one. But you know what? It helped. You know, they fell, and it helped a lot of the teams from not the top 10 go into the top 10, and it's given more teams chance. And the championship's going to look a little different this year.
Maybe 2 lost teams that are going to be playing for the national title.
That is quite possible. Yes.
Now, when you talk about football, I know there's a lot of Notre Dame fans. They have fans all over the country with touchdown Jesus, etc. So there's a love-hate relationship with Notre Dame.
Yep.
But I love the fact that Notre Dame, they actually graduate most of their athletes.
You know what? That's important. You know, I mean, when you go to school, and I've been around these guys, you've been around these guys, and we've been those guys.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people, you know, they think, oh, these guys don't go to class and this and that and the other. They actually, a lot of them work harder than doing. They have tutors that go on the road with us, and they've got all these people. And at Notre Dame especially, if you do not crack the whip on these guys, and if they do not maintain a certain GPA, they're off the team, man. And that's plain. And they graduate their guys, and they go on to bigger and better things if they don't make it in the NFL.
Well, having that alumni on your resume definitely helps. Now, you talked about a little bit UCLA in the Rose Bowl.
Yes.
In Pasadena. Big Pac-12 championship caliber game because Arizona State was favored to maybe win the South, but they were blown out by Texas A&M on the road. And then USC went in there, and they handled Arizona State. So how does Arizona State come into the Rose Bowl and beat the Bruins?
That is still boggling my mind almost a week later. I mean, when you go into someone, and Arizona State's not even ranked. And I'm not saying, guys that are listening, I am not saying if you are not ranked, you're not a good team. I am not saying that at all. But when you go in the mentality in a locker room and you have an unranked team, and I know how these coaches talk, I know how these players talk, and if you get beat by an unranked team, that seems to be a little bit of insult to people. But when they came in there and they went into UCLA's house, UCLA did not score in the first quarter or the third quarter.
Yes.
Now, granted, Arizona had 9 in the first, 6 in the second, 14 in the third, and 9 in the fourth. And when you go 2 quarters without scoring, how can you win?
Exactly. So we know that they're college kids, and they have to find a way to stay focused as they're studying, of course.
Yeah.
And then playing. You know, most college kids, they fly across the country at least twice a week.
Yeah, it's
to
hard.
get there and to come back.
Yeah.
And then one more game that was really huge was Georgia and Alabama.
Whoa,
I know that
baby.
SEC football is big, but Alabama, Nick Saban, $7 million a year.
Yep.
Everyone wants to say, well, he's a little bit washed up, but they find a way to win the big games.
You know what? Alabama came out a little slow. Well, a lot slow in the first quarter. 3 points. Georgia had nothing. You know what? Alabama put the heat on. 21 points in the second, 14 in the third. They didn't score in the fourth, but you know what? They put that Bulldog in the doghouse. You know, they shut them fans up, the naysayers up. You know what? Alabama, roll tide, man. That's exactly what they did.
Well, out here on the West Coast, there's a big game. In fact, the ESPN Game of the Week is going to be in Utah, where the Cal Bears will go into Utah. And again, why do I say that? Because if you're an advertiser and you're writing a check every week or every month, and you're trying to write a check to get in front of fans, there's a clue. If Home Depot is sponsoring the Pac-12 Game of the Week on national television, then why are you not supporting a sports program? With Epic Sports Radio, we also have room for sponsorship, but it's going to close fast. But think about it. When you watch TV this weekend, you're going to see ESPN on television. And they're covering what, Glenn?
They're covering everything major. Those guys are in everything. You sponsor Epic Sports Radio and Epic News Sports. We are out there with these guys covering these things. And you could be sponsoring us. We could be sitting at a desk with your logo on there. And we are looking for sponsors.
And with that said, too, was just touched a little bit. It's tough to beat Utah when you're at their place because of the altitude. Cal, this is the kind of team with their quarterback. They could score 40 points but still lose because their defense is not as good.
That's crazy.
So that's going to be a tough game for Cal coming up.
Yep.
And also USC's playing Washington here in the Pac-12 Conference. LSU, South Carolina, we know they have a strong running game at LSU. And then, again, I know you talked about OU in Texas coming up. But one more thing that I would like to say about the college football scene. If you are a fan, if you're driving in your car and you want to support sports, don't forget about the high school level. Because the high school level in California is as big as anything in the United States. We've talked about the NFL with Big C at the start of the show. We also talked about the SEC football and then OU in Texas and college football and what it means to teams. Notre Dame, we touched on Alabama, UCLA, Ohio State. How are they still number one? I don't know.
I don't either.
But I do know that you and I covered the Grant game with Elk Grove in California, Northern California, ranked number 2 and 3.
You and what I did.
You did.
I called number 3 beating number 2, and that's exactly what happened.
It happened.
Yeah,
and it's a lot of things that people can do for all of the people that really want to get behind kids. We know about the tragedy that happened in Oregon, and we have to see an end to that.
Yes.
But I know that all the parents who want to put something behind their kids. Well, you're an advertiser. You can actually put your money behind kids who are trying to do something with their lives. I recall growing up, there was always Little League. There was always something. Punt,
something
pass,
for us
and kick.
to do,
Something for us to do. So as you're driving and you want to spend your money, go support local high school football teams. They play it as well as anywhere in the country here in the Sackville Kings section. We have number 1 Folsom. If you also look throughout the state, Elk Grove is dominant. They're undefeated. Grant, Coach Albergini is looking at 27 years in a row making the playoffs. Granite Bay has a good program. In Southern California at the high school scene, St. John Bosco of Bellflower. There's Mater Dei of Santa Ana and Long Beach Poly. All of these kids are playing sports, and they could use your advertising dollars and support.
Exactly. And what we do here at Epic News Sports is we take some of those advertising dollars and we give back to the schools. We give back in scholarships. And what I want to do, too, is I want to remind you people to follow us on Epic News Sports on Twitter and Facebook. Every 50th person that follows us, we're going to donate to these schools, and we're going to put your name in a raffle to win some NFL tickets.
And that's wonderful. So, again, for everyone, we want to thank you, number 1, for listening to the program. But it's not about us. It's about helping the youth, and money talks. And when you have a decision to make, ask yourself, will you sponsoring a high school program or a sports show make a difference in the life of those kids?
It will.
And we know that it does. So we want to thank Big C for covering with us today with NFL and college. We'll get back into more next week as we talk about the baseball playoffs coming up, WNBA as well. And there's always golf in Northern California. You can follow us on Epic Sports Radio every Wednesday at 4 o'clock p.m. on Money 105.5. You can also log into epicnewsports.com, and you can find out all the late things happening in the world of sports. Again, my name is Charlton Curry with Glenn Spillman.
We'll see you guys next Wednesday, 4 o'clock.
on Epic Sports Radio. Thank you so much.
All right.
Good job, Glenn.
You too, brother.